To make paper, you need pulp, and to make pulp, you need trees. Historically, pulp mills would process trees out in the forest near where they were cut down. After the tree was felled, they would drive a big mobile chipper out into the woods, and the tree would be turned into chips right there. Those chips would then be run back to the mill for processing into pulp and paper products. But by doing the process this way, you end up with a lot of waste. Things like bark, branches, and small pieces of wood. These waste products that are produced during chipping, which could have become biomass fuel, would end up being left out in the woods to rot. Meanwhile, back at the mill, they would use natural gas as an energy source to turn these wood chips into pulp and paper products that we all use. But if you're paying attention, you might have noticed it sure sounds like we're leaving one kind of fuel on the forest floor and using another to power the mill. What if we could use the waste product from the tree to power the process of creating essential products? This is exactly the question that Mercer Peace River was looking to answer. Instead of processing trees roadside, with the support of Emissions Reduction Alberta, they've come up with a new process that brings trees back to what they're calling the wood room, where the waste products they produced can be used as fuel to power the rest of the process. They can do this while still maintaining sustainable forest management practices. This new process will displace about 464,000 gigajoules of natural gas per year, reducing emissions by around 114,000 tons of CO2 equivalent annually. We wanted to know more, so we called up Cal Dakin, Director of Innovation and Woodlands at Mercer Peace River, to talk about sustainable forest management, mass timber production, and the impact for forestry on the climate, here on Carbon Copy. So to get started, Cal, can you introduce our listeners to Mercer Peace River?
Absolutely. So Mercer Peace River is a pulp mill in northwestern Alberta. We're located just north of Peace River. And on an annual basis, we produce about 440,000 to 480,000 tons of pulp, depending on our mix of hardwood and softwood. We employ about 400 people directly and then about another 600 indirectly through our various operations and woodlands and contract staff. So a pretty big anchor tenant, I would say, for the Peace River community.
And can you just walk us through what is the typical way that we harvest trees from the forest and end up with forest products?
The typical way is, and I think that it's really important to mention this part is before you even get out there to harvest trees, there's an awful lot of planning that goes on. So Alberta is one of the best jurisdictions in the world, in my opinion, on managing forests. And we plan for 200 years to make sure that we have a sustainable forest out there, and that that no matter what we're doing, that the future of the forest is as good and as productive and as healthy as it is today. So there's a lot of planning that goes on, 200-year planning, 70-year planning, 40-year planning, 20-year plans, 10-year plans, 5 and 1. So there's a lot of level of planning that goes on. And so through that planning, we identify where we're going to go out and harvest. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement and consultation with Indigenous communities, and then once we've gone through all those steps, we actually go out there with logging equipment. We harvest that equipment, usually with feather bunchers, and then we pull it roadside with equipment called skidders. Then we process it, so a processor comes along and basically takes the branches off and cuts it to the length that'll fit on the truck. Then we bring it into the mill, and then we'll do some processing here. And then it goes into the mill to make pulp at our facility. At other facilities, it might go in to make dimension lumber and other products.
Great. So you talked about the planning and stakeholder engagement. So how does the act of forestation to make these products impact landscapes, the environment, and the economy? What's the big picture here?
Okay, so the big picture of forestry is, there's a lot of forest-dependent communities out there. In rural Alberta, there's not a lot of industry at times, and the forestry is, there's forestry, agriculture, oil and gas, and we kind of all play a part in the economy. But what we do is, the growing stock here in Alberta, the trees grow relatively slow, 70 years to hit rotation, sometimes as much as 100 years. So you got to work on a really large land base to kind of draw in those trees. You go out and harvest, and you try and as much as possible harvest in a way that mimics natural processes, right? So if you look at it, we operate in a fire-dominated ecosystem. If you're seeing the smoke that's out there in the skies from these fires, that's the patchwork that's created. It historically was done by fires. They go across the landscape and reset and get new growth. Well, as much as possible, we do our harvesting in a way that, like I said, mimics how fire would go through there. And so that we're doing it as a naturally representative way as possible. And we're trying to capture that biomass that would otherwise have ended up in fires and ends up in smoke. So there's this way of capturing what otherwise might have actually been released into the atmosphere into forest products for everyday use of people. So when I got into forestry, what drew me into it even as a kid, it was really that looked at it was it's a renewable resource. You go out there, what you're harvesting is going to be there again in the future because we're reforesting and we're planting. And that provides all of those high-paying, good jobs for people that can live in these remote communities, so that we can be that anchor tenant that provides that stability year in, year out to these local communities. We're not, to compare us to oil and gas is a little bit more of a boom and bust cycle, where forestry is, from an economic perspective, we may not have the same margins, but we're here, we're stable, we continue to provide for the communities for decades.
Yeah, so there's, a natural forestry cycle, and it is a huge source of sustainable products as long as we kind of are doing our best to emulate that natural forestry cycle and keep that resource returning itself over 100-year scales, sounds like.
Absolutely.
That gives us a little background on the broader forestry sector. What's unique about the strategy and approach that Mercer uses at the Peace River pulp mill? Love to hear a little bit more about your maybe specific forest management practices. You talked about Indigenous engagement earlier, and maybe you could even tell us a little bit about your innovation plans as well.
So that's a whole lot to cover. So why don't I start with kind of what how we do our forest management, maybe what's a little bit unique about it. So we have a forest management area, our forest management agreement, so they call it an FMA, we operate on. And in that area, one of the big focuses that we do is we have a lot of merchantable retention. And again, I go back to that emulating or mimicking natural disturbance. When you go through, if you've ever been through an area that has burned or had a fire, there's a lot of material, a lot of biomass, a lot of trees that stay after a fire. There's fire skips, there's trees that didn't burn as much. So we leave 15% retention in our blocks. To try and provide that refugia is what they call it, where the insects and the birds and everything can go in there and then spread out as the forest grows up around it. So that's I think one of the marquee parts of our forest management plan. What was the second part? You had second and third, so I had three parts to that question and I got one.
That's good. That's a good start. So you had mentioned earlier Indigenous engagements and partnerships. So I was curious about if there's anything you could tell us about how that works for the Mercer Peace River pulp mill.
So we do a lot of consultation efforts, but we also do a lot of community engagement. One of the projects that we've been working on for the last number of years is we call it the TLU project, so the Traditional Land Use Project. It's a project that we've been working on for a number of years where we're providing a mapping platform that's GIS, so Global Information System, and where the communities can not only see all of our activities, and it's provided so that the community can log in, they can see wherever our plans are, and they can actually store their data on there and put their sites, and they have complete data sovereignty as in we can't see what they have put on there, but if they want to share it with us so that we can adapt and our plans to address that, we can do that. So we've been working on that platform for a number of years, and we're trying to find as many ways to make interaction available to the communities in a way that's accessible to them, without forcing them to give up any of their data or to tell us anything that they don't want to do. And it's a very delicate approach, because we have to really build a lot of trust. And, a lot of the communities aren't necessarily fully on board with that approach yet. And we're going to learn new ways of doing it, and we may have to adapt our approach, but we're definitely putting our foot forward with trying to have that technology available that is available at the community. Anybody that has a phone, a computer, or an iPad can go on, see our plans, and be able to overlay their data if they so choose.
Oh, it gives us a bit of a sense of what that looks like. And then maybe if you could just comment on, you were talking about how the forestry sector is always there, kind of a steady eddy, but what does innovation look like in the forestry sector, and specifically from Mercer's perspective and your perspective as innovation director?
Yeah, so this is an extremely exciting time for forest innovation. There's more happening in the last 5 years than I've seen in the previous 20 of my career. Now that the world is really starting to focus on how do we reduce carbon in the atmosphere, there's been so many opportunities for us to innovate. One of the projects that we did with ERA support was our wood room, and this new wood room that allows us to bring more biomass on site. And before that, biomass was out in the bush and it was, rotting and putting out methane, which is a greenhouse gas multiplier. Instead, now we've brought that here, and that's allowing us to do a whole bunch of new opportunities. And I'm sure we're going to cover that off in some more questions before. But what else is going on with innovation is, there's all sorts of things that we're looking at to reduce carbon, so methane pyrolysis, so that we can produce hydrogen to displace natural gas, producing more green power. So we're looking at opportunities to how do you maximize the amount of power we're producing from biomass as opposed to natural gas? What are those additional bioproducts that we can do from using, say, lignin, which is the glue that holds the trees together? Can you use lignin to do the glues in OSB? We have an entire division of ours that makes mass timbers to make skyrise buildings, and it sequesters significant amounts of forest. So when you look at the spectrum of what's been happening in the last number of years and what Mercer's been doing to be on the leading edge of that innovation, to me it's really exciting. Each one of those things I could probably talk for half an hour on, because there's so much going on.
So really the bioeconomy and kind of net zero and all that is sort of driving more innovation in the forestry sector and more opportunities to use all parts of the tree.
Absolutely. It's really starting to accelerate, there's been an opportunity that wasn't there in the past is, when you have organizations like ERA, Emissions Reduction Alberta, willing to help companies get over that first hurdle, testing that first technology, or are getting those, testing out systems that we wouldn't have been able to do in the past. That's been really critical. And, like I could give you an example is, I have nothing but high praise for Alberta and the initiatives they've done. One of the things they had was the, petroleum tax credit that allowed companies to invest in new technologies. The challenge with that is the tax credit works after you're already up and running and you're making a profit. Well, how do you get to that project? How do you do the number of years while you're building the project and you're short all that cash flow? If you weren't quite able to do it, how many of those projects would not have happened? And so, like our new wood room, had ERA not seen the potential in it, had they not supported us, we wouldn't have got to this next stage where the wood room's in place, and it's now kind of the cornerstone of our next wave of innovation. So to me, that's pretty exciting, and I really appreciate how Alberta has supported the forest industry to make that transition.
Industrial scale carbon capture. North America's first hydrogen-powered locomotives. Using drones for reforestation. Since 2009, Emissions Reduction Alberta has been helping to deliver on the province's environmental and economic goals by investing in projects just like these. Projects that pilot, demonstrate, and deploy clean technologies across our industries. Whether it's detecting methane from space, producing biogas from Alberta's agriculture industry, or one of almost 300 other projects in our portfolio, ERA's investments in these game-changing technologies are reducing emissions, lowering costs, attracting investment, and creating jobs right here in Alberta. ERA's funding is sourced from the Government of Alberta through the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction, or TIER, Fund, which is Alberta's provincial industrial carbon price. For more information about Emissions Reduction Alberta, visit eralberta.ca.
I wanted to take a step back also to talk a little bit more about the wood room, because at the beginning you were saying how the way typical forest management and forestry works is that you're harvesting and breaking down the trees out in the woods. And with this new wood room, could you just walk us through kind of what's the transformation in the process that's happening?
Yeah, you bet. So we Mercer was doing things a little different than most of the industry. So what we had was mobile chippers. And so we would actually send these big diesel monster chippers out to the bush, and then we would actually process the trees at roadside. So you'd make a harvest area, and then you'd bring the trees, and then you chip it, and then anything, the residuals. We don't call them waste materials anymore because it's not waste. It's all material that we could use. But the residuals would just been left in the block. Instead of that, and this was the big change, was now that we have a wood room that's here, and it is world-class technology. It's the first of this size that's ever been put in place. It allowed us to bring the whole tree, minus the branches, but the whole log, the whole bowl, gets brought in and it gets processed on site. So now those residuals that wouldn't be part of the pulping process, so that's your bark and any of the pieces that don't make a good chip that would go through a pulping process, well, now that's on site, and now we can do something else with them, whether it's generate power or look for opportunities to do biofuels or other innovative hydrogen. Now it's here. Now it's available, so now it's the next step for those other projects.
So it's a cornerstone or launching point for all these other bioeconomy products, because you have a whole bunch of new feedstock and biomass that you didn't have before that's at the mill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Okay, thanks. And then this is kind of a tricky question, but I think you're the right person to answer it. So you were talking at the beginning about how we need to mimic natural forest, not the natural forestry cycle. And now we're taking more biomass out of the forest than we were before. So I was curious how that works from a forest sustainability perspective, making sure that biomass and nutrients are getting returned to the soil. I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about that.
That's a fantastic question, and actually that's one of the things that we get taught when we're in tech school and university, and actually it is kind of interesting because the vast majority of the nutrients in your trees is actually in the branches and the leaves, or if it's a conifer tree, in the needles. That material is left on site. We don't bring that in. So we're taking the bulls. You can, if you were doing lots of successive removals in a short period of time, you might be able to reduce the calcium on site, but it's typically not the case. And first reason is you're leaving the vast majority of it, where it's stored, which is in the leaves and the branches, on site. The second thing is because our rotation, which means the time it takes to grow a tree, is so long. We're talking 70 years on the short end of a rotation, 100, 110 for a lot of the trees to grow. It allows the site to regenerate those nutrients over time. So it's it's not if you were continuing to draw a lot off, if like you were a farmer and it was cropping every year and taking all those nutrients out, you would really be able to deplete that, because you're not allowing the soil the time to put that carbon and those nutrients back in the soil. Well, with 70 to 110 or 120 years, the soils have times to naturally regenerate, and the plants and everything put that back into the soil.
Oh, thanks for that. I just think it helps us understand how much thought and actually forestry expertise and land management expertise goes into this process that maybe we don't see as end users of forest products.
Well, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that everything we do is sustainable. It's unfortunate. I think forestry, when I was a kid, when I was growing up, that renewable resource was seen as such a positive thing. It was, now it's almost there's a pushback thinking, well, you shouldn't be out in the forest. You everything you do is a distraction. When you're in a boreal forest, which is a fire-dominated ecosystem, like I said previously, you're really just capturing part of that process that would already happen, that cycle of renewal that occurs through fire. You're just capturing a part of that and making value from it, and you're emulating that natural disturbance as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, maybe if I can summarize, it's kind of you're redirecting what would have gone up in flames through wildfires towards valuable products and also sequestering carbon while you're at it. I love it.
You got it.
And then on the theme of sustainability, so we're Emissions Reduction Alberta, so we want to reduce emissions. Can you help us understand the emissions reductions that come from the new woodroom and the project that was supported by ERA with Mercer?
Yeah, so it has had that. The woodroom project did have a significant effect. So the first part about it is, remember how I said we were leaving those residuals in the bush? Well, now we brought them here. So instead of them staying in the forest, they're brought here. Well, now that displaces natural gas. So instead of us burning natural gas to drive our mill processes, we're using more biomass. So that displaced 464,000 gigajoules of natural gas per year. Like that's the first part, right? So it's about 114,000 tons of CO2 per year. That's a lot. So that's just about 1 million tons of CO2 will be displaced by 2030, and 3.5 million tons displaced by 2050, just by bringing that here and replacing natural gas in those processes. So it's pretty significant. We're very pleased with that carbon reduction.
That gives us some perspective. And is this something that other pulp mills are using or could be rolled out to other pulp mills in the province?
But other companies did come out and have a look because they wanted to see if that could reduce the amount of whitewood loss that they lose, and so that they can actually, their ratio of forest products to the amount of wood brought in is actually improved. So yes, there is the opportunity for other mills to come. And we're actually a very open process. If there's anybody else that wants to come and see this, big rotary debarker, they're more than welcome to.
Great. No, thanks. So we could see these emissions reductions achieved at other mills, maybe in the future. So now I want to turn to the challenges. So we'll talk about different types of challenges, but I'll start with just what are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced in your role as innovation director at Mercer?
So a few of them. I'll start with one of the ones that's more of it's kind of interesting is in this space, in carbon reduction, in even in the environmental space, is moving from a competitive approach to the detriment of one another to a approach where you're creating shared value. That's been a real challenge. It's a real opportunity, but it's also been a challenge. Is can we work with other mills in our area and other industries to reduce our footprint and enhance the amount of value that's created, and that everybody is a little better off. And I often find when you go to have those preliminary discussions with people, they're really like, what are you trying to get out of this? How is this going to work? And, it's really a bit of an uphill climb to demonstrate, hey, if we work together here, there's more for us to all go out. Let's worry about how we're going to capture that value after. But first, let's see if we can create this project that's going to be better for both of us, and then we'll sort it out afterwards. And so that's been a challenge. But fortunately, when you do tackle that, you can often find some partnerships and opportunities that weren't there before, and create some really interesting opportunities for growth and improvement, and benefits to communities and economic development. So, I'm not providing a lot of details there, but I would say that shared value creation is one of the big challenges.
Yeah, and maybe unique new types of partnerships that didn't exist before just because you're producing new products, and who knows? We'll see. I'm excited. So then kind of a bigger picture, what are some of the systemic challenges? Forestry is a relatively mature sector, but what are some of the emerging challenges that you're seeing with all these changes?
Yeah, this is a big challenge. So, we compete on an international stage. So we are a mature industry. We compete on an international stage, and the markets are international. And there's a lot of change in how forestry is being done around the world, particularly in pulp, where we operate. So there's a lot of mega mills being created in South America and Southeast Asia, and these mega mills they absolutely dwarf anything that we have in Canada. And why they do that is they actually do plantations. So they cut down the jungle, or they move into these new areas, and they have all these big plantations that are right adjacent to the mill. They grow acacia in 4 years, and they can grow eucalyptus in 5.5 years. And we are operating on a natural land base where we're trying to emulate natural disturbance, and it takes us 70 to 110 years to grow a tree. Those are really tough comparisons to do. So we have to do forest management different, and we have to really look at how we're making our products, and how are we finding those ways to adapt to make ourselves, through innovation, more profitable, so that we can compete with those companies that are growing not in the same. They're growing trees in a very different way than we are on a natural landscape.
That sounds like a huge challenge. And are there differences in the types of products that come from these different types of trees?
Well, that's a great question. So if you look at it from a pulp perspective, not appreciably different. So if you look at eucalyptus and acacia, there's some properties that are different, some that are better than our hardwood, some that are maybe not quite as good. But are they substitutable? Yes. So if you're not doing stuff on the innovation side of things to bring down your costs and make those innovative new products, you're going to lose that competition long term. So that, in addition to all of the drive to decarbonize, that's the competitive forces we're facing on an international scale that's really driving us to, we must innovate. We must make those next steps forward, or our business models won't be sustainable.
Yeah, if that's not a good case for innovation, then I don't know what is. So thanks for that background. That really helps us get a sense of how Alberta sits in a more global context. So I want to talk a little bit about the future of the project and also innovation at Mercer. So now you have the wood room built in your facility. So you're getting more biomass than you had before. It opens up these new opportunities. So what's next?
So what's next? Now there is so much that's going on. So I'll start with the value creation, the shared value creation. So one of the things that we're really working on right now is so we produce a lot of pulp. But we've also approached a lot of the local sawmills or lumber mills, and we're saying, hey, how can we cooperate more with you guys? And how can we, make sure that we're getting the maximized value from the forest, from these forest products, because we can't compete internationally if we're not really working together. So how do we support you guys? What do we need to do to change our business model? And so we are doing a number of things to change our business model to enhance those lumber mills so that they can do better. And then that creates our opportunity for us to pick up additional fiber and residuals. So that helps out our business model a lot. Now, back to the wood room and what that did for us is the wood room brought all those residuals on site. That's a game changer for us. So we're right now in the process of, we're going to be replacing, we have 2 generators on site, both of which are powered by, they're all biomass fired generators. They can use natural gas, but they're predominantly running on biomass. But now we have all this additional biomass on site. We're going to upgrade our generator from a 25 megawatt generator to a 40 megawatt generator and make even more green power. And what's amazing about, what we really excited about our green power is, with solar and wind, which are, it's fantastic that they're moving into Alberta and providing green energy, but they're more variable. Sometimes it's the wind's not blowing, or, at night the sun's not shining. So there's a lot of volatility associated with the renewables. Well, we can provide green baseload. And so we're increasing the amount of green baseload that we can provide to the grid. So that's exciting. And then we have another project that we're looking at, which is stack heat recovery, which was also supported by ERA at Alberta Pacific. They did a project with ERA at Alberta Pacific. Well, we've looked at their project. We believe that technology is going to be applicable here. And so, we're looking at those projects and we're saying, hey, maybe we can do this here. And what that does, this is, exciting is, so right now we have a lot of hot steam that's leaving the stack here. Well, can we capture a bunch of that heat before it's released, capture some of that, and reduce the amount of natural gas we're using, because we can, preheat our water for our processes through doing it. So that was a great project that was tested out. Alpac learned all the metallurgy. They learned how to do the piping and everything. And so, ERA helped them do that project, and now we're going to be able to benefit from that to produce more green power. So that's pretty exciting. And then we're also investigating carbon capture options in the future. So if we can, once you have a stack heat recovery, like I was just saying, well, that's a perfect opportunity to actually interject a carbon capture technology. And so we're investigating that as well. So you see that the wood room was that anchor, that catalyst that allows us to now expand energy production, look at stack heat recovery, and then now into carbon capture. So, and then there's a host of other net zero accelerators that we might be able to do in association as we work our way towards that carbon capture project.
That's super exciting to hear, and especially because there's lots of follow-on benefits, from that to the grid, for example, of getting additional clean baseload power. I think lots of people don't necessarily think of the forestry sector when they think of clean baseload. So it's good to hear that. Okay, I just have one more question for you. So this is kind of big picture. Given everything that we've just talked about, what do you think are the big evolutions that we're going to see in forestry over the next 5, 10, 25 years?
So that is a big question, and there's so much going on right now in forestry. So I'll talk about the good and maybe a little bit of the bad. So the good, if you see that evolution that we're going through, to generating power, to doing carbon capture, I think you're going to see that on a lot of mills. Why is that? A lot of the mills that generate their own power puts us in the position where we can do bioenergy carbon capture and storage. And bioenergy carbon capture and storage has the benefit of being net negative, because you're capturing carbon from a natural source, and then you have the opportunity to sequester it. So the indications is that that's going to be a new push. Is anybody that has the ability to do bioenergy is going to start being paired with carbon capture and storage. So I see that being a big trend. I think there'll be a slow uptake over the next 5 years. But once the various technologies are proven out, because they're moving from some of the first capture technologies to the newer ones, like solid sorbent technologies and things, as those get proven and tested out, I think you're going to see large scale deployment of carbon capture and storage with forestry operations. So that's really exciting. And I also see that you're going to see a more diversified product base coming, where every mill out there is trying to capture and reduce the amount of natural gas and to provide green products, the greenest out there, because that's what's going to help us. And what I mean by green is they're not the color green, of course, but that there is carbon neutral or negative as possible, and that you've done as little of a use of water as possible and as little use of chemicals as possible, because that's what's going to make us competitive with those international players that are off of plantations. We have to have a superior product in just about every way. So that trend is going to occur. You're also going to see way more mass timber construction. To me, this is exciting. So instead of just stick building homes, you're going to see a lot of towers and apartment blocks built by mass timber, because it allows us to sequester a lot of carbon while building the homes we need in Canada. It's almost every day in the news you're hearing that we have a shortage of homes. Well, this is one of the most carbon friendly approaches to do it, is to do mass timber homes. So technology, the learning, the understanding of that, the permitting, all that's changing, and you can see the growth of that industry is really ticking up. So I see that as some of the changes. On the less positive side, it's getting harder to operate on the forest land base because it seems that there's a lot, that people just don't want to see us operating in the forest. They would like to see it all turned into parks, and that's a real challenge. So if you look at in a fire-dominated ecosystem like us, you can let those forests grow up, and without forest management, now we have so many activities that are integrated out in the forest. You have cities that are out in the forest. And you let the biomass accumulate beyond what was part of the natural range variation, and then invariably you're going to have fires, and those fires are going to go through and they're going to eat that up, and you could have captured some of that for value creation and products. So I'm hoping that we don't go that way in Alberta. In fact, we're working with the Alberta Forest Products Association, and the vision that we have for Alberta is that this could be the top manufacturing location for forest products in North America. And we believe that the combination of that of the forest industry and what the government's support has been, and the government has been fantastically supportive of our industry. We believe that we could be that jurisdiction that could be the best in North America, that finds that balance between healthy ecosystems and vibrant communities, because we have a robust forest industry.
Oh, you definitely convinced me. What do you think is the solution to tell more people this story and help convince them of all the benefits of the forest sector to their everyday lives?
That's a great question. I think that sometimes it is just things like these podcasts. But I also think that, how do we bring people out more into the forest and to see how it works? We were having a discussion here just this week about, there's a great wildland park that's close to us. Maybe we should put up some more signage and bring out more school kids so that they can come and see that. But also take them out to the forest and to see a forest fire after 10 years, and to see where we've harvested after 10 years. And see how much convergence, as in how close they become over time. Because I think that's what's missed, is that we see a picture only of in one spot in time, where you're not seeing how things occur and how forests grow together. And the research that's been done out there demonstrating that a really well-designed harvest area and a fire, the better you design them, the sooner they converge post-harvest to having the same characteristics. And the research and the amount of effort we've put into trying to understand that more and more has brought that from the old cut block approach, where the convergence might not have happened till 50 or 70 years after. Well, now convergence might be happening as little as 15 or 10 years post-harvest, and it looks almost the same. It has some of the same dynamics as a fire. That's pretty impressive.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cal. It's been great to have you, and thanks for all your amazing knowledge that you've imparted to us.
Happy to help.